How are you guys doing? My name is Jenna Pilgrim. I am the head of portfolio growth at Coin Fund. We are one of the oldest crypto-native venture capital firms, and I have the distinct privilege of interviewing our two executives from Kraken. Thank you very much for your support of Redacted, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation. So,
Us as well.
Yeah. So, could you give our audience just a little bit of introduction about you and what you do at Kraken? So, do you want to go first?
Hey guys, so Mayur Gupta, I'm the Chief Growth and Marketing Officer at Kraken. Been here for 4 years, which pretty much means have seen all modes of the category, you know, ups and downs, bears and bulls, where the definition and state of crypto has changed, how we play with TradFi has evolved. So I've seen everything, but I think to answer and give you context on Kraken, I'm sure all the smart people here are already using it, but we are one of the oldest exchanges in the world. We've been around for 15 years. We started as a crypto exchange, primarily focused on early on professional traders, but over the years have evolved ourselves into a more vertically integrated financial operating system. Now absolutely obsessed that we're building infrastructure for the future of finance, you know, and excited about this state of open finance where, like we say, financial freedom is native and not negotiated. So yeah, excited to dive in today.
Hey guys, I'm Calvin Leyon. I'm the head of on-chain here at Kraken. Been in crypto for about 12 years. I built a company and was acquired by Kraken in 2020. It's been a very interesting time being in crypto early and then watching it mature to kind of the state of where we're at today. At Kraken, responsible kind of for like the hybridization efforts that are happening where we think about the future of Kraken and leveraging on-chain technology and then overseeing the L2 Inc.
Awesome, awesome. So why don't we start with altcoins? So a lot of people here are traders. They're interested in trading all kinds of different tokens. Kraken has been giving people access to altcoins, as you said, for 15 years now. Talk to us about what, when you're thinking about different projects that want to either list on Kraken or that you want to give users access to on Kraken. This could be to either of you. What do you look for? What tokens are you excited about?
Look, we are consistently looking at where innovation's happening, and at the end of the day, all the decisions are client first. So we want to be the platform, we want to be the marketplace where users can find all kinds of projects, all kinds of tokens that solve some kind of utility. So we obviously have a pretty transparent process that our token listing team goes through to assess validity, but also as a platform, you want to make sure that whatever we're exposing, whatever projects, whatever tokens and assets we're exposing to our clients, that they represent the credibility that Kraken brings. So it's a lot of underlying process that we go through, but in terms of the spectrum of projects, it's all across the board. I don't know if, Calvin, you want to add anything more?
Yeah, I think we, back in the day, I think there was a very stringent process around listing. Now you have a lot of assets on chain. People can access them through different ways, through self-custody. So we take a data-driven approach, I think, for the most part with our listing teams. We're always looking to see where volumes are trending and going in the right direction. And then a lot of the other things is, we look at Kraken as a global exchange. So there's different pockets that now as, Mayur's grown the business quite a bit since he's come along. And we think about things of like, how do we get more involved on the ground in like different geos? So one of the things we look at in the future is how does Kraken become an exchange that's kind of like an internet NASDAQ? And so with tokenized assets, how do we expand coverage, right? And some of the things that we think about on-chain is hybridization. So while we may not be able to list fast enough, we may be able to connect directly so that people can trade that directly from our exchange UI.
Awesome. So let's double tap a little bit on that, on like that sort of on-chain, off-chain, centralized versus decentralized concept. So obviously, as we know, Kraken is building Inc. And it's been interesting to watch can you walk us through like the decision-making process about like why launch an L1, why launch an L2, what is the use beyond driving more users to use Kraken's sort of core business?
100%. So I think Kraken's a multiple billion-dollar company, but it's a closed ecosystem, and so we figured out a really good way to build products, serve it directly to our users globally. When we think about the on-chain economy and the on-chain ecosystem, it is a layer that sits on top of Kraken that's meant to be collaborative, open, and we can work with these external partners to build zero to ones, right? So I think about like this podcast or this blog that I read like a couple years ago, platforms versus aggregators, and it's about like if you can create a platform in which a company can come and build on top of it that's bigger than the platform itself, you've accomplished something. And I think that's where we look at the next 10 years of global financial services, of how does this proliferate to an extent that globally, no matter where I'm building, you can tap into the modular building blocks that we've spent a decade and a half building through, as well as the licenses and our users. How do we open that up to help spur kind of this entire product economy of financial services that's being built upon? So that's kind of like the first principles of like how we think about this as an ecosystem that sits on top of a business that we've built that we feel is really strong. But I think, in terms of our decision-making process, why does it make sense for us? If we're going to, inject capital, inject resources, talent into something, it needs to make sense where you have levels of control to guide it. Right now, obviously, a lot of institutions are coming to Kraken, and we're trying to figure out, hey, what can we work with you guys on? What can we co-build with you guys? A lot of that institutional DeFi sits on-chain. And so for us to have an environment, a sandbox to collaborate with these third parties is truly powerful as we get into the next 5-10 years.
Totally. So I can just tap on that. So
wait, Mayur has to. He has.
I was gonna say, Mayur, what are you hearing from users about what do they want?
Yeah, I think see, when we think about piggybacking on everything Calvin said, when we think about on-chain, for us it's not about adding a feature or it's a bolt-on. It's almost an inevitable evolution of what we started. Because without on-chain, without that permissionless, borderless infrastructure and ecosystem, both Kraken and crypto is meaningless, right? So for us, we had to get to this point, but we had to start at a certain place. For us, we made a conscious choice when Jesse and team and our co-founders, when they bootstrapped Kraken, it was to actually simplify access for the world, so we started there. But now it's an extension of that inevitable journey to give the power and access from the world of DeFi and on-chain. But what we are doing is not just to give them access. Obviously, there's a lot of users who are going to access everything we are building on top of Ink, but we are also now aggregating and abstracting that complexity for normal users who could still access that value now through the Kraken ecosystem. So that's the vision, and we actually, we don't see the world as TradFi, CFI, DeFi. At the end of the day, you want to put the client first, and now finally, crypto as a category is at a point where the focus is more on the value, and the underlying demarcation is more for the builders, more for the infrastructure. But the goal is, how do you highlight and surface the value and continue to hide the technology more and more?
Of course, yeah. So when you're thinking about how to create value for your users, obviously people can purchase tokens. Those tokens can go up and down in value. They can cash out. They can make money that way. But you guys actually had a pretty big week. You had a pretty big announcement on Tuesday, I believe, about an earn product, right? So you recently launched the ability for, if you're not familiar, for people to be able to earn yield on the deposits that they put into Kraken. They're actually using one of our portfolio companies, Veda, for that, so quite excited about that. Thank you. And so talk to us a little bit more about sort of the journey as to how did you get to creating yield for users? Like what was the sort of decision tree there?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if as a financial ecosystem and financial operating system, if you really need a decision tree for yield. It is just so evident, right? It is just so obvious. So for us, it wasn't really a decision tree. It was more about, okay, now we are ready to make it available. And I think based on everything that Calvin and the team are doing and our consumer business, and that's really the product team that has partnered with Veda and rest of the infrastructure players to bring it to life. It resonates, it connects back to what our vision has been, which is at this stage of our journey, it is about how do we bring and distribute the value that historically has been restricted to players and users who are open to self-custody. They're absolutely comfortable, with taking on the complexity of self-custody. How do we make it available and accessible and distribute around the world through our layer, through Kraken's ecosystem and Kraken's experiences? So the way we think about this launch is just bringing that value. The way we are positioning it is we are not talking as much about what happens, what 5 layers of complexities underneath, who is actually managing risk and security underneath. What our users care about is, wow, up to 8%, up to 5%, assets that historically I'm being used to pay to custody somewhere in a traditional financial institution like a bank. Now I'm going to get yield in a very simple way. That's the magic. That's the transition and inflection point that the category is going through, and we're very excited that we are leading that change.
Interesting. So, how many of you have stable coins that you just hold? How many? Show of hands. How many of you earn yield on your stable coins? Keep your hand up if you know where the yield comes from. No one. So where do we, or how do you sort of approach that educational, I guess, hurdle to educate users as to risk profiles, and like how do you protect users from themselves?
Yeah, that's a great point, because this is exactly what we've been discussing the last 2 weeks, right? Now we've launched the product. How do you build trust? If the world is not used to seeing 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8% yield, and you just say that, the first reaction is it can't be real. There's got to be something more underneath. So we absolutely understand that, and that's where a lot of the marketing, a lot of the content and storytelling is so critical, to be transparent, to educate the world on how this happens, to educate the world on why the intermediaries have been absorbing all the benefits and all the profits in the past. So it's nothing new. You know, this is nothing new that has been generated. The only difference is it is now being passed through to the end user. So you will see over the next few weeks, this is part of my job and remit, where we now have to take the product along with a very clear and clear understanding of how it actually plays out. What are the different levels of risk for different types of vaults? What does that really mean for different types of users? So that's the goal. That is what we are working on, and you will see stuff coming out this week, next week, and subsequently, in the near future as well.
Awesome. And then Calvin, I guess same question. How do you, when it comes to the on-chain ecosystem of Ink, how do you educate people on how to build on Ink, what they can do on Ink? Like, what are the like, examples of some use cases that they could build there?
Yeah, so I think generally, just kind of rewinding a bit, on-chain, like 7 years ago, there was like DEXs, but there was basically no liquidity. And so from that point, you needed kind of like some type of big event to get people to start to focus on-chain. That was kind of meme coins. We started to see a lot of volume flow into Solana. And from that point, you started to think about like on-chain is just the base of what you build on, but really it's about the application layer. And this past year we've seen Polymarket, you've seen Pump Fund, you've seen Hyperliquid, which are companies that are developing really good products for everyday people, and they're driving revenues. We're not talking about like the technical properties of the chain as much anymore. We're focusing on, hey, like crypto's grown up quite a bit. How do we build applications that people want to use on that cutting edge? I think it's really about innovation. And so when it comes to Ink, the messaging is the exact same. If you're a developer, if you've built in the space or you've built in the TradFi space, the switch isn't as crazy as you think it would be. You're still focusing on the right primitives of how would I approach building a 0-to-1 product? How do I identify my customer segments? How do I create value? And the thing is that's a little bit different is when you're building on a chain, there's a little bit more support than just building a startup by yourself. So rather than going through like a traditional venture capital round, there's different ways of approaching fundraising. There's different ways of approaching collaboration, because a lot of these on-chain protocols you can connect to and create kind of like a string of pearls of different types of feature sets that you wouldn't be able to do if I'm just building by myself. I would think about a lot, Plaid is one of my favorite companies in the world, because they opened up the ability for this entire robo-advisory suite of products to be built on top of. And on-chain, as we start to have more stable coins and more assets on-chain, this year you're projected to see $7 trillion of volume happen on-chain. That's a lot, and we're starting to trickle up there. So as the entire on-chain ecosystem, not just Ink, but everything we see in that entire verse gets bigger, the opportunity is going to increase, and I think we'll start to see builders that have come from traditional financial backgrounds or even consumer backgrounds start to see the value of what Web3 is doing and transacting on-chain.
What's I'm going to press you on this. What is an example of something that is built on Ink that you think is like a really innovative application that people could check out?
I wouldn't say innovative, but we have a product called NATO. It's a Cloud deck, so if you guys have used Hyperliquid, very similar to that. It's in alpha right now. We're about to actually enter our public launch, but I think we did around $40 billion of volume in our alpha stage, the highest day being like $1.5 billion. Quite a bit for a product that was launched in like 45 days. So we're starting to see the demand for on-chain quite a bit in terms of projects that have tokens coming and incentives able to run on them. Projects that I'm excited about is some of the stuff that we're currently doing with NFTs. Today we launched from NATO an NFT collection that I think I was talking to Oliver just backstage. He's like, it's the craziest numbers we've seen in a while for a project launch. But for us, I think it's after we have these two core protocols and a base layer, how do we think about investing in builders, right? And so I think working and focusing on our developer community, I'm a big fan of just like quant-based stuff in TradFi. And it's like, can we bring that talent on-chain and create new applications? We've seen options on-chain. We've seen some things that haven't quite got adoption yet. But I think in the coming years, as we focus more on like, these are just applications. The sign-in and kind of the Web3 aspect needs to be abstracted to Mayur's point so that it makes sense for everyday users. And they don't feel like you need to educate because they're used to these user flows and these user patterns. But yeah.
I think, so you mentioned Polymarket and Kalshi a while back. And so talk to me about, obviously, you guys have altcoins, you have a bunch of different products that people can use. Are you guys interested at all in the prediction market space? Is that like providing something like that to users? Like how do you compete with these up and coming platforms that are really focusing on that, and then still try to not be a master of none?
I think it's so cool that you can bet on anything. Like I think that that concept is absolutely insane. A good friend of mine, Jeremy, started Augur, and it was just like too early, And so you see now with Polymarket and Kalshi coming out, I think they've done a tremendous job. It's been a little bit of a rivalry between the both, and fun to watch as an outside spectator of this. I really do believe in prediction markets. I think volume-wise in January, still tiny. Like for how much we're talking about it, tiny. And that's just because of the world understanding how this can change and financialize everything in a way where like when we looked at on-chain, there was a lot of situations where products were trying to focus on the technical properties of on-chain and lead with that, rather than like, hey, this is like a new way to do something. And I think the entire sports world is looking at these prediction markets as a potential disruptor to the things that they do today and starting to stay really close. From our perspective, we've seen very similar playbooks, run by companies like Robinhood, where you have us as a company that can serve as distribution, right? And so obviously we're having conversations with the main prediction markets of how do we think about that. But we think that this is a very long-term thing that's slowly developing. And so where we see the market and the players today is not where we're going to see maybe 2 to 3 years from now. We're going to see new ones pop up and emerge. And I think the people that hold the keys are the people that have the users. So distribution hubs like us, like Revolut, like Fanatics recently did one. And so I think we'll see new prediction markets. I think we'll see perps prediction markets, leverage prediction markets. I could speak on the on-chain side. We are looking to build our own. On the Kraken side, I know we're looking to partner. But I think that this is not like a one winner. I think it'll get kind of fragmented to different focuses for sports and politics. I don't think that it really matters because it's just about the event contract, right? So I think really exciting.
Yeah, and I think one part of your question was also how do we make these decisions? So look, we consistently play the long game, right? We are focused on the mission to transform world's transition, to drive world's transition to this open financial system. And in that journey, sometimes we are the first ones to do something. Like we were the first player at scale to bring tokenized equities, make it accessible. But it's all ultimately the decision-making on what we choose to address ultimately comes from our clients. Where do we think drives most value? Because at the end of the day, the players who will win and drive global adoption and make an impact globally and impact billions of lives will be not just based on the cool things we do, but it's also going to be based on the good things that we choose not to do. So that's a constant discussion and prioritization that we go through every week. So there's a lot of conversation internally on prediction markets and what role we play, but there's tons of other things that are happening in parallel too, which we believe are very central to our mission and also core to how we add value to our clients.
So when for you as a marketer, like making decisions on what to market and what your audience wants and all the rest of it. How do you really see prediction markets have kind of changed the data game for like what kind of data sources you use to market your products to consumers? How have prediction markets really changed that?
Look, prediction markets, does that change fundamentally? I'm not sure. I think prediction markets is a great signal for what's happening for a certain cohort of the market. It's not like everybody suddenly is waking up and saying, I'm going to bet on everything. There is an absolute TAM for prediction markets, and what prediction markets on-chain have done is made it accessible, made it so seamless, so easy to be able to predict direction for any kind of an event, from sports to politics to culture and so on. So yes, but I don't think that in of itself is suddenly dramatically shifting this movement that we are going through. I think that has a key role to play. It's a great signal for one cohort, but at the same time, I could also say what stablecoins has done is fundamentally shifting the core problem. What tokenized equities and tokenized XXX is doing is fundamentally changing, bringing the world closer to the ethos and the mission of crypto. For the first time, I feel the bigger transformations for me are, the credibility that the category is getting because of all the regulation and the clarity that is coming across the world, especially in this country. The utility that is finally becoming more evident, prediction market being one of them for one cohort, but the bigger utility, I think, is coming through stablecoins. The bigger utility is coming through tokenized equities that the whole world now has access to one of the most liquid and strongest economies in the world, which was only privileged to a far few. It was restricted to certain geographies. Stablecoin where, people are no longer asking, what does crypto mean for me? Because for 15 years, it was the builders who were excited about crypto, but the normal person struggling to pay, struggling or living from paycheck to paycheck, kept wondering, what does it mean for me? Now stablecoins is proving, look, this is now your way to fight inflation if you're living in a country that is struggling with it. This is your way to earn basic 4, 5, 6% yield without speculating in a very consistent and stable way on top of what you're earning, versus paying somebody to just hold that asset and feel confident about it. So I think the bigger transformation is underneath, which is the utility of this incredible technology is finally becoming so obvious and evident to the normal person, and not just for that 4 to 5% of the builders. But we had to get to this point to get the infrastructure and the value now so that it becomes so obvious for normal people.
Definitely. And
Wait,
I think
one more point.
that access part is so important.
One more thing I want to say about prediction markets. So, media, like when I'm trying to figure out what's the truth, you follow the money. So I think that's where prediction markets are really, really cool. To the point that you were mentioning about data, when it comes to elections, we saw prediction markets shine. When it comes to sports, I think when you're looking for data, it's the best place to go.
Definitely. So you were talking about, Mayur, you were talking about tokenized equities. So obviously that's yet another product that we can offer to retail users. What do you think the market for tokenized equities looks like a year from now?
Well, I think everything tokenized is just going to be default. It's very similar to, I think, 18 months from now, and obviously it's so hard to predict the world 6 months, so don't know 18 months, but very, very soon, I think the conversation between TradFi and traditional systems and crypto and on-chain will move away. It's very similar to, again, being from the world of growth and marketing. There was a phase of 4 or 5 years where everybody thought digital marketing was this new thing, up until we all realized we are just living in a world that is inherently digital. So that phrase is no longer used in any vernacular, unless you're an absolute obsolete, CPG, which is 150-year-old, and then you still have a digital team sitting somewhere, right? I think we are going through a phase where crypto, TradFi, on-chain, DeFi, off-chain, tokenized equities versus traditional equities is this transition phase. Eventually, everything is on-chain. The end user won't care. You are going to be trading 24/7. You are going to expect that you consistently just keep running. There is liquidity available after 4 p.m. or 4:30 p.m., depending on what time zone you're in. And it just becomes the way we run finance. So I think we are just in this transition phase. If you compare this to 3 years back, everybody was saying we are the bridge. We are the bridge between TradFi and crypto. We no longer think that. We are already the intersection. Everyone, most of the leading players who were born in this world of crypto or digitally native, we don't think about the bridge anymore. We feel that we are the intersection point. The winners are going to be the players who remove friction, who pass through more and more value to the end user, and they connect the ecosystem more seamlessly.
Yeah. When it comes to like our vision with X stocks, to Mayur's point, when you look at like the geo-arb opportunity of the fact that I might be in another country where I can't get the upside of what's happening in the American economy to the top companies, the fastest growing companies in the world, I think it's really important to think about access and accessibility. And so there's like the unlock that comes geographically, but I think the main thing here that I get excited about is unified collateral. I think one day you're going to see a connected product suite where all of your assets can be used as collateral. And so, X stocks was kind of like the beginning of our foray into this. And you think about the fact that if you open up the American economy to the world, what does that do for America? What does that do for those companies? And I think like that's kind of like what our vision was accessibility.
Totally, totally. How do you think the sort of emerging stablecoin narrative for institutions really supports that?
Cool. I think as you have more stablecoins on chain, it leads to the other side, supply and demand, right? So when it comes to tokenized assets, obviously right now we're at like the public company stage. The private company stage might take a little bit of time, but these new asset types with more stablecoin flow leads to more transactions happening between supply and demand. So I think it's a big unlock. Like stablecoins are the instrument that is the central piece of all of on-chain, right? Because how else are you going to store your value in a way that makes sense? And for crypto traders, it was the unlock of like, hey, when the market's not doing so hot, I'm going to bounce to stables, stay there for a bit. I don't have to go back to fiat. So I think, yeah, as we start to see more stables, more institutional DeFi products, that is going to flow into more of these tokenized equities. It just hasn't got that adoption yet, because when you think about it, the unlock isn't there for tokenized equities yet. Like in America, why would I hold a tokenized equity when I can just hold the stock, right? Now, at another part of the world, I might not be able to access that stock. So that's why I hold the tokenized equity. So I think it's exposure, and stable coins move everywhere. So it helps that a lot.
And there's another movement, of course, that's happening right now, which makes all of this even more relevant, which is everything that's happening in the world of AI and all the agentic stuff that happens. So as that becomes more and more prominent, how will all the transactions get settled and paid? That's not going to be on traditional money. It's not programmable. So that is where I think both of these movements will go hand in hand, and they are already starting to converge. But I think stables and just everything tokenized is going to be the way you settle agentic commerce or every agentic transaction as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think that core concept of having an agent that has essentially a bank account to be able to go and do things is really important to the future of kind of agentic commerce. Calvin, how do you think about building really a modern organization in the world of agentic commerce? Like internally at Kraken, how do you guys use agents to improve your business, to do things for you? Are you running a Claude bot? What's going on internally?
I have a rule with my engineers because there's too much cursor code happening. So I think it's a huge, when it comes to speed, rapid prototyping, there's a lot of use cases that we use it. We're actually working on Beholder, which is kind of like our modern, intelligent neobanking product. So it's the next version of Kraken Wallet as we take a step up and start to think about the everyday users. And the core thesis of that product is crypto is complicated. I think we were talking about this backstage. How do you abstract that, where we're able to create a user experience that's so intuitive that you don't need the knowledge to do things, but you can learn through that chat interface, right, to accomplish specific goals. And I think the advent of agentic finance in the coming year, I think it's going to be one of the biggest themes that we see, is that a lot of these are going to be executing on chain, but you're not going to know how. Yeah. It's I want to accomplish goal A to B, or these are the things that I'm interested in. I want to do them. And I think intent-based trading will also start to run through these types of interfaces, because I have friends that trade 50 million on the go, and it's difficult. Some of them are trading from Starlink on a plane. And I think with some of the things you could do with programmatic trading in the past, people used to have their own Python scripts for how they think about stuff. Agentic finance just opens up this new door where these things that were complicated and almost gate kept in a black box by like quote unquote the smart people are being opened up to everyday users.
I want to be friends with those $50 million too.
Just to say, Kraken does not condone trading on, in unstable internet environments.
True.
True. I was going to say we do.
Okay, guys, so we are out of time. So Polymarket has you at an 86% likelihood of going public this year. Could you comment on that?
Redacted.
Anyway, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.